What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Max Manus Pod. Really appreciate all of you guys tuning in for today's episode. I feel like I don't even have to hype up today's guest at all. If you're a baseball fan who's listening to the Max Manus Pod, you know who Michael Kay is. 30 plus years as the Yankees TV announcer, radio host, Bronx born and raised Yankee fan. He was awesome. I could have sat back and listened to him just tell stories and offer input for hours and hours and hours, kind of like the Susan Waldman episode from last week, which I also appreciated all of the very kind things that a lot of people had to say about that. I was glad people appreciated it as much as it did. But yeah, Kay is awesome. He's always been super cool to me, super cool to all of the Jomboy Media folks, obviously, and for all of the really cool people that I've had the fortune of getting to know in baseball, I'm going to show a photo on the YouTube for the people watching. There's not a whole lot of people like Michael Kay that I have photos of 8-year-old me at Yankee spring training with Michael Kay. So very cool full circle moment all these years later for him to be coming on the podcast. And I thought the episode was great. We touched on a lot of deep cut Yankee stuff. We touched on kind of baseball as a whole and the state of the league and future of media and a lot of those things. And obviously I talked to him a lot about him being able to live out his childhood dream as the broadcaster of the Yankees and his upbringing and, kind of just the in-depth baseball questions about identity and love of the sport that I like to talk with all of my guests about. So I was really happy with how I came out. I hope you all are too. Please like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. I have a whole lot more guests lined up and a whole lot more off-season content that I want to deliver you guys. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Max Manus Pod. I am incredibly excited for today's guest. Last week we had Susan Waldman on, and it is hard to top a voice of the New York Yankees with anybody, so I think the only thing we could do is bring in the television voice of the New York Yankees. Michael Kay, thank you so much for joining me today.
You got it, Max. Thank you.
I know you're battling through a little bit of a cold or a throat issue, so whatever you got going on, I appreciate you being a trooper for me today.
No problem. Thanks.
All right, so there's a question that I like to start all of our guests out with, and Susan knocked it out of the park with her answer. So you have a high bar to live up to. You can go, I'll leave it broad, and you can take it whatever direction you want. Michael Kay, why do you love baseball?
I have always loved it. Ever since I was a kid, I can't really put my finger on it. I just think that there's so much going on when there's nothing going on. And I think you really have to know the game to really enjoy it to its fullest. And as a kid, for some reason, even as an 8 or a 9-year-old, I got the nuance. And there's so much rich history in baseball. And I always laugh when people say that baseball is boring. And I just go, well, you're probably boring, because it's not boring at all. There's so many things going on when there really is, nothing going on. So I think that's why I love it as much as I do, because it's so broad in scope, and the history is so rich, and everything is interconnected from like 1923 to 2025. And I love that aspect of it.
How do you think your appreciation of baseball would have been different if you weren't a kid from the Bronx that grew up in all of that history and all of that rich tradition?
I'm not quite sure, obviously, because this is the only life that I lived. I think the fact that my father was a little bit of a Yankee fan, not as big of a Yankee fan as I was, I was kind of like born into it. I guess if I was born in Brooklyn, maybe I would feel differently, but I take great pride, Max, in the fact that when I became a Yankee fan, they were terrible. So I was not a front runner. I had Horace Clarke at second base, Gene Michael at shortstop, Jerry Kenny, Ron Woods. That was an awful, awful team. And for some reason, I gravitated toward that. So I really started becoming a fan like in 69 and 70, and obviously the Mets were champions. And I shied away from that, and I ended up rooting for the Yankees. So it paid off.
Yeah, that's actually something I wanted to talk to you about, is how I often joke that I had the worst timing of all time, and that 2010 was the first year that I really locked into Yankees baseball. And it's been 15 years and we're still waiting. So I guess it's something I go back and forth on a lot, because I try to be reasonable and I try to look around baseball right now and say, okay, the Yankees of the late 90s and the late 70s, those dynasties don't just happen anymore. It's an unfair bar to kind of hold the Yankees to hold anyone to right now. But at the same time, you would think that an organization that's consistently making the playoffs, consistently spending a lot of money for 15 years, you would think one of those years they would have had a ring. So because I guess, how old were you when the Yankees were in the late 70s and that era was coming around? You had some tough years, but I'm sure
when they finally made the World Series, I was 15. So
Okay.
1976. Yeah.
So if you were, put yourself in my shoes, because I think there's a real generational divide now between Yankees fans, right? If you were 23, 24, had been dialed into the Yankees for 15 years, and it was year and year again, ALDS appearance, ALCS appearance, won World Series, but can't bring home the big one, do you think your love of the Yankees would have wavered, your love of baseball?
No, I don't, because when I started like really getting interested in '69, there was no wild card, so no playoff, no playoff, no playoff, no playoff, no playoff, well, right through '75. And those are like the formative years when you're a kid, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and during that time, '73, the Mets made the World Series again. So no, I think the fact that they struggled to get there made it all the more worthwhile when they finally got there. Um, yeah, it's a strange dichotomy, Max, because I deal with it on my radio show all the time. Fans of your age, maybe even a little bit older, they get ticked off that the Yankees haven't won a World Series, and I understand that because in the lore of the Yankees, since George Steinbrenner bought the team in '73, it's obviously World Series or bust, which I think is an unreasonable expectation now. But I understand why fans expect it because it was promised to them a long time ago. But every year, when the season starts, and we report the spring training in February, every year you have a chance to win the World Series. There's not one year since you become a fan where you didn't think your team had a chance to win the World Series. The fact that they haven't, it's tough to do. The Dodgers are making it seem easy right now, but it's tough to do. So maybe if they were non-competitive, maybe if you rooted for a team that was awful like the Rockies, that should affect you. But don't be spoiled, Max. They have a chance every single year, so it shouldn't turn you off at all.
You're saying something similar to what Jeff Passan said when he came on my podcast, that he said to me, Yankees fans don't realize how good they have it, essentially. He was like, would you rather be a Yankees fan or a Pirates fan? And my response was like, okay, sure. Like, don't get me wrong in that regard. But I think for Yankees fans of my age, it gets tricky because, well, like you said, the organization is essentially telling us, judge us on championship or bust. Since I was, 7, 8 years old walking around Yankee Stadium, all you see is the photos of the legends and the World Series and all of these things. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, this is clearly something it's not unattainable, right? It should be within reach. And especially with the way the organization talks about themselves is they still kind of, the brand is that valor, right? The brand is winning. And that's where the fans go like, well, what do you want us to expect from you? Because sure, would I rather be a Yankees fan than a Pirates fan or a Rockies fan? Yeah, but that's not the bar you're telling me to hold you to. So it's I don't really know where that gray area is, and I try to find, like, I think if there's a Yankees fan that truly is just a miserable baseball fan and only watches baseball for a World Series, and if the Yankees don't win the World Series one year, they say that wasn't worth my time, I don't want to watch baseball again. Okay, get out of here. You don't know what you're talking about. But that being said, there is something that kind of just feels like it's missing, that it's like, all right, the June walk-off homers are great. All the ALDS wins. I have a signed photo right behind me that I have to put on my wall of Didi's 2-homer game in Cleveland in 2017. That's one of the happiest Yankees memories of my lifetime. But at a certain point, it's almost like I don't blame people who start asking, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Well, I think, when they finally win, you're going to say the juice was worth the squeeze because the squeeze is part of the fun of it. I remember something that Derek Jeter's dad always used to tell me. He said, I'm afraid that my son doesn't enjoy the journey. And I think that you don't enjoy the journey. I think a lot of Yankee fans don't enjoy the journey. And I think that's sad. We've had people call up on my radio show where they go, I don't care what Aaron Judge does during the regular season. If he doesn't perform in the postseason, I don't care. Well, you don't care about 62 home runs. You don't care about that thrilling season. You don't care about 2 straight MVPs. Then that's a you issue. That's not a Yankee issue. Also, I check this out because I also bring up the fact with some Yankee people, you guys are always saying World Series a bust. And they said, nobody from Yankee ownership has said that since George Steinbrenner passed away because it's a completely different world. Hal Steinbrenner's never said it. Brian Cashman has never said it. I think they realize it. They can't come out and say, well, that's not the end game. Obviously, they try to win a World Series every year, but I think it's foolish to say a season is a failure. Do you mean that 2024 they got to the World Series Game 5, that season was a failure? I can't accept that. It was a disappointment they didn't win. I think that if you want to say last year was a failure, I can almost buy it. You don't go to the World Series one year and then you get knocked out in Game 5. of the ALDS. Well, they didn't even come close to reaching their goal. But if you make the World Series, that season's not a failure. If you win a division, that season's not a failure. Might be a disappointment because you didn't win the ultimate prize, but it's not a failure.
So for the if George was around crowd, my retort to a lot of those people is always kind of that Steinbrenner, you were there. So tell me how much of this is revisionist history and tell me how much of this is accurate. To me, I think that a lot of people are missing out on the parody of baseball nowadays and this idea of, if George was around, the Yankees would still be winning championships left and right. George never had to compete with Guggenheim and Steve Cohen that are printing money and can throw $700 million at a guy without blinking, right? So if George was around today, do you think he would have been able to be the George of old? Do you think the way Yankees fans kind of hold him in this like heralded manner would be different?
The George Steinbrenner history is somewhat complicated. Number one, when George Steinbrenner was at the height of being George Steinbrenner, he was Guggenheim. So every other owner looked at him the same way. Also, there wasn't 3 wildcard teams. There wasn't 3 divisions back then. There's a lot more layers to get to the World Series. The first couple of World Series, the Yankees won in 77 and 78. They just had to win the ALCS against the Royals. So that's a little bit different as well. I think he would try to win. Obviously, that's his raison d'etre. I think the thing that makes me laugh, Max, is when people criticize Hal Steinbrenner. Hal Steinbrenner has a $320 million payroll. Now, if you want to criticize the Yankees for not winning, then criticize the front office for not getting the right players. $320 million, that's plenty to build a team to win a World Series. The Blue Jays didn't have that high of a payroll. They went to Game 7, the 11th inning of the World Series. So it's not about how much money you spend. It's how you spend it. So I also think when I talk about the complicated history of George Steinbrenner, I don't think you were alive then. When George Steinbrenner got suspended, I was at the ballpark that day, and the crowd was cheering. So we only look back at 96, 98, 99, 2000 because he got a chance at the second act. But there was a time that the Yankee fans didn't love George Steinbrenner either, where the money spent wasn't smart money, where he kept firing managers and things like that. His second act, I think, revived his legacy, which is an important thing to he and the family. But there were bad times too. The whole 1980s, they didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying about the revisionist
except for 81.
History. That's something that's been like an eye-opener to me. I remember watching when the Derek Jeter doc came out and some other docs about kind of the 1980s, early 90s Yankees, that a lot of younger fans like me, like I said, I started following baseball in 2010. That was the year Steinbrenner passed. That's honestly I think one of my first, I remember where I was when I heard that Yankees news. And, I didn't comprehend everything that was George Steinbrenner, but I knew wow, George Steinbrenner passed away. That's a big deal. And it was a real eye-opener to realize Steinbrenner was not only not beloved among baseball for a long time, among Yankees fans, he was kind of like public enemy number one. And I think it's one of those things where I try to keep myself in check a lot, where sometimes I feel like Yankees fans who are but baseball fans in general, but for a Yankees fan like myself, we're so dialed in, we're so in tune with everything that's going on a day-to-day basis that in the playoffs this year, everybody, as soon as the Yankees lose, everybody wants to run with their take of why it was. And I think sometimes the answer is right in front of you, and it's, Max Fried and Carlos Rodon were great all year, and they weren't in the playoffs, and they didn't hit against Toronto. So if those happened, you can point fingers at Cashman, at Hal, Boone, whoever you want. I'm not saying it's not justified. I thought some of the Volpe stuff was pretty crazy, especially in the playoffs, the way they kept running him out there. I think there are valid qualms, but I think at the end of the day, a lot of Yankees fans kind of don't like to acknowledge that a lot of the time the reality is just the players that needed to play well and that played well all year didn't play well when it mattered.
Well, I think in sports in general, everybody wants to blame the manager or the GM. Even in football, the manager or your director of football operations, same thing in the NBA. Sometimes the players don't do their job. You might have the right players and they just didn't do that job that day. As you said, Max Fried didn't do his job properly against the Blue Jays and didn't do his job against Carlos Rodon didn't either. That happens. Is that on Aaron Boone? Aaron Boone's going to have to be the one who wears it. If he finishes his time as a Yankee manager and they don't win a World Series, it's going to be on him. I don't see it being on him. I don't. I think another thing that amplifies what we're going through right now is that there's social media, podcasts, stuff like that. 1980, there wasn't such a thing. There wasn't really even talk radio. So now people have a megaphone to scream their dissatisfaction. Now, I'm sure back in 1980, we would have heard Bob Lemon stinks. Why Billy Martin coming back again? Stuff like that. Now people have a platform. People are in their basement with Cheeto dust on their fingers, and they're screaming that, Brian Cashman doesn't know what he's doing. The one thing that rankles Yankee fans, and I'm sorry, it's true, is Brian Cashman a perfect GM? Nope, he's not. But just because you spend money doesn't mean that you make the playoffs all the time. Look at the Mets. Mets had a $340 million payroll last year. They didn't make the playoffs. Brian Cashman has built a team that wins every single year, over 500 every single year since 1993. There's something to be said for that. And here's what really angers Yankee fans. He's making the Hall of Fame. Brian Cashman is going to go to the Hall of Fame. Other GMs look at him and they can't believe that he's done what he's done. Yes, he has an advantage because he could spend a lot of money. But again, just because you spend a lot of money, that doesn't guarantee anything. You have to put together a good team.
Yeah, I'm a Cashman guy. I'm sure there are a lot of people that turned off the podcast as soon as I said that. But when I look back at last winter, first off, if the Yankees had signed Juan Soto, like let's admit it, we all kind of wanted to. Everybody, we coped after the fact. But that last day when the bids were coming down to the wire, every Yankees fan was saying, 700, 800, we don't care, just throw it at him. If the Yankees had signed Soto last year, I think people are forgetting they would not have had Garrett Cole or Max Fried this season, so that would have been an utter disaster. And the way, when I look at Cashman's, both his offseason and his deadline moves last year, there's not a lot that you can point to that really didn't pan out. Bellinger, we all want back. Williams ended on a fine enough note, which is crazy to say considering how crazy that that whole thing got at a certain point. But even the deadline moves, I was pumped on deadline day. Bednar and Doval, I think they looked at that as kind of, they're just, all right, Williams and Weaver are free agents. If we don't bring them back, there's our insurance. But like Goldschmidt did his job, Caballero, these are all, it's hard to point to a single move he made and go, that was the one that really set them back. And so for that reason alone, like, I think you can talk about player development and especially hitter development. I think you can point at, like I said, the way they've handled Volpe, I think has gotten a lot of very just criticism. But beyond that, again, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of just as simple as the players on the field need to play better. And a lot of people don't like when explanations for things are that simple.
Well, I think if you want to criticize anything that Brian and the front office has done, you can look in the abstract and say, they built a team that strikes out too much. And I think that strikeouts certainly show up in the postseason because you're facing really good pitching. You're facing the best pitching in the postseason. And I think that has bitten the Yankees a lot in October. They strike out a lot. The best way that I can articulate what the Yankees have built, it's like playing a game of blackjack. And if you play with one deck and you play once, your theories and the way you go about it might not work. Like if you have a 12 and the dealer's showing a 6 and you never hit, which is the way to play, usually if you play the whole day, it's going to come out and work. So I think the Yankees, they play blackjack for 162 games, and it works all the time. The model that they built works all the time. But in a best of 5 and a best of 7, sometimes the cards don't go your way. My complaint with them, although he has claimed recently he never said the word crapshoot, he has said random. Random means crapshoot in a nice way. You got to build a better engine that makes October less of a crapshoot. That's the only thing that I would put on him. It's got to be a team that puts the ball in play and makes the other team make mistakes. The Yankees strike out too much, and I think that really haunts them in the postseason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think any Yankees fan is going to disagree with anything you said there. I want to reel it back a little bit to what we were talking about before, kind of you as being a kid from the Bronx that gets to live his childhood dream. I'll tell you, one of the saddest moments for me every baseball season is at the end of the regular season every year, you do a social media post where you say, yes, doesn't get to carry the games in the playoffs, which they've got to figure something out when the media deals expire in 2028. There's got to be some way that we can make that happen because it's getting ridiculous. But whatever, as an aside, when you do that post every year, you say, it's never lost on me that I get to live out my childhood dream every day. Thank you, fans. I appreciate all of you. And there's a lot of people that kind of say that as a formality and lip service. But there's a lot of people, I think, within baseball that you can tell the top dogs in the baseball industry made it where they are because they still listen to that inner child, because that drive that they have is the fact that they know, like, there's nothing I would rather be doing than this, and this has always been the goal. So I guess my question for you is, especially when you're doing the radio every day and you have to call the Yankee game every night, when so much of what you do is consumed by the 24-hour news cycle, and when you've seen how the sausage is made, and you've seen a lot of the things that there's a reason why a lot of people don't stick around in baseball, right? There's a reason why a lot of people see, like I said, how the sausage is made and say, I'm good. How do you kind of preserve that childlike love and wonder and appreciation for the magic that is baseball?
Well, I have some friends that obviously I went to high school with. I still have friends from that time, and college. Most of my good friends I met in Fordham, and I always tell them, if you ever hear me complain about my job, just punch me right in the face, because how many people would kill for this job? And every time I walk into that booth, seriously, Max, every time I look around and take it all in, because it could be the last time. And at the end of the year, I really do that. I sit down and I compose that tweet. And I look around and take it all in, because I don't know what's going to happen over the winter. I don't know if I'm going to be back there. I just realize how lucky I am. I mean, how many people get to live the dream they had as a 9-year-old, to be the Yankee announcer, and to do it now. The next season is going to be year 35. So it's kind of stunning. You mentioned knowing and seeing how the sausage is made. That gives you a distaste for some things. It really does. But when you look at the entire broad scope of what it is, it's a beautiful game, and you get to know people. I mean, I root for people now. I don't root for teams. I do root for people. Like Aaron Judge is about as nice a person as you're ever going to want to meet. I root for him. I want to see him do well. There are some people on the Yankees who I won't even get into right now that I don't like, and I don't want to see them do well. I mean, that's just the way it is. So when you see the inner workings of things, there's things that you like and there's things that you don't like. But again, if you made a pro and con list and say, okay, what's good about my job and what's bad, there's way more pros than cons. So it keeps me coming back, and hopefully I'll come back as long as they'll have me.
So obviously your Yankees fandom, like you said, has changed because you're in a position where you kind of can't really be a Yankees fan in that sense. How has your baseball fandom, if you still even call it that, or your appreciation of the sport changed when you look back over the decades once you were starting off as a writer? Well, I guess even before that, when you were just a kid, and then when you became a writer, and then now, like you said, 35 years on the air. How are the things that you root for, that you appreciate, that you watch for different?
It's just, I guess it's even intensified because I know how difficult it is and what it goes into making a team, and you see all the people that go into it. You look at Brian Cashman. Okay, so everybody thinks, okay, Brian Cashman puts the team together. There's like so many people that work with Brian Cashman that do so many different things. There's so many people that work in that clubhouse. There's so many coaches and the analytics group that work to make this happen. When you're on the plane, you see there's so many people, Max, that I don't even know all their names. I mean, that's how many people. I mean, it takes a village, that old line. It takes a village to build something like this. So I think that gives me a greater appreciation. It's not just thrown together with a guy smoking a cigar and a bourbon in front of him and making a deal at a bar at the winter meetings. There's a lot that go into this. A lot of smart people put it together. So I think it gives me even a greater appreciation because I know how hard it is.
Are there specific misconceptions that you think, not even casual fans, but like locked in watching 162, nitty gritty 40, following the 40-man roster moves, who are the Yankees protecting for the Rule 5 draft, like that level of baseball fans? Are there misconceptions that you think they still have that if they were in the stadium every day like you are and seeing all the behind the scenes people, they would realize like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that goes like that?
Well, the biggest misconception, I think, and I don't know why it angers me, but it does, when you get fans on social media saying that Hal Steinbrenner doesn't care about winning. He just cares about making money. I've never heard such crap in my life. Really. I have gotten to have a pretty good relationship with Hal. This guy wants to win. He has a burning desire to win. He's not like his dad. Nobody's ever going to be like George Steinbrenner. But Hal Steinbrenner and the two sisters and all the grandchildren, they desperately want to win. If he didn't want to win, He could easily put a competitive team on the field for $220 million and put $100 million in he and the investor's pocket. He could easily do that. He doesn't. He wants to win with the same white hot desire as George. Now, the Steinbrenner family, I believe, only owns 55% of the Yankees. So there's 45% that's owned by investors. He has to answer to them as well. So I keep reading, well, look at the money that they generate, and they only pay this percent. This is a business. This is not like Guggenheim Partners or like Steve Cohen. This is how the Steinbrenner family earns their living. They've got other side things, but the Yankees are the engine that is their business. So he's not going to lose money. He's also a businessman. He's smart that way. I think George sometimes would lose money. Hal will not, but he wants to win. That's the misconception that bothers me the most. If you want to say he doesn't go about it the way you like, that's fine. But the people that insist he doesn't care if he wins, they could not be more wrong. They just could not be more wrong.
Yeah, I try to ask myself a lot before I put any take out there, like, do I know definitively that this is true? If I'm putting a stat out there, that's something that's easy enough for me to go, okay, yeah, this guy hasn't hit for a month. That's pretty objective. How can I stand here objectively and say, oh, I know for a fact Hal Steinbrenner doesn't care? There are other owners. The Pirates haven't signed a player to a multi-year deal since 2016. Like, MLB had to force the A's to sign a player last year because the other owners were going like, this is ridiculous that you're getting so much of our money and not spending of it. And they had to sign a player for the 3 years they're spending in a stadium where they have no actual fans anyway. So there are plenty of owners out there that don't actually care. And I think you're right. They're like, yeah, you want to criticize specific things about Hal, that's fine. But it's a weird accusation to throw out there for people that don't know him. I want to talk, I guess let's go bigger, broader baseball as a whole. It's easy to be a prisoner of the moment and look around and say, oh, the guys right now are the greatest ever. And I'm sure everybody in that generation does that a little bit. But when you look at the spot that baseball's in right now with Ohtani, Judge, Skeens, the growing international presence, the World Series numbers, the WBC coming up, as somebody who suffered through a lot of years of baseball in middle school when most of my friends wanted to watch other sports and no one really wants to talk about Dustin Ackley and Garrett Jones on the 2015 Yankees, I'm looking at the future of baseball as like we could be entering a real golden age here. And I really don't think that's a prisoner of the moment take. How do you think this era of baseball stacks up to the other ones you've covered?
I think the athletes are just incredible. I think there's more athletic, players than ever before. I mean, if you look at, an Aaron Judge and just the way he's built, that doesn't happen in baseball history. Maybe Frank Howard, but he wasn't as muscular as Aaron Judge. I think the players, the skill set is at an all-time high, and I think that's the way it is in every single sport. I really do. And that's not taking anything away from, the Babe Ruths and the Lou Gehrig's and stuff like that. But the bottom line is this. The game is at an all-time high in terms of performance and the things that they do. If you want to complain about something, maybe it's the way the game is designed where, strikeouts don't matter, but I think that's starting to come back as well. I think the one problem that I would say the game has, Max, is that the people that are, entrusted to build teams are entrusted to build teams that will be competitive, not to be entertaining. That's not their job. And I think that, the three true outcomes, that's not really entertaining. It's just not. A walk, a home run, and a strikeout. Two of them suck. One of them is great. So 67% of something not being good is not good for the sport. I think that has to change as well. And the GMs and the baseball operations people have to also realize that this is an entertainment product and put a more entertaining thing on the field. And I think the commissioner and the people in baseball are doing the right thing. The shot clock, I call it, that's been a boon for baseball. 239 for a game, perfect. Everything that they've employed, other than the ghost runner at second base, which I hate, I think it's been great. I think it's really enhanced the product, and I think it'll only get better. The only thing I worry about is if in their infinite wisdom they think it's smart to close out the 2027 season. That would set back all the progress.
Yeah, my 25th birthday is going to be on December 2nd, 2026, and I am really, really hoping that I do not have to celebrate that birthday with a lockout. I guess we'll see what happens. My guess up until this point has been it'll probably be similar to last time, where there's going to be a lot of petty negotiations and all that stuff that's not going to be fun to follow for a few months. But I think with all the media deals they have coming in, I think with just the betterment of the sport and where it's at right now, and I think the owners know deep down the players simply just are not going to accept a salary cap, because that's one thing I've learned from working with and being around a lot of current players and ex-players at Jomboy Media, is that it is drilled into your head. Like, even before you get to the big leagues, when you're in the minors, they drill into your head that there were years and years of players that suffered and didn't have didn't make nearly as much money as you did and had to put up with a lot more than you did. And they did it all because they said, we're never taking a salary cap. And you, with how good you have it right now, you cannot be the generation that screws that up for everybody else. So I think the owners know deep, deep down that, one, it's just a futile fight because the players aren't going to accept it. And two, there's too much on the line, and baseball's in too good of a spot for them to be missing games.
I hope you're right. I'm not as convinced as you. I think the owners in baseball and the commissioner looks and goes, "There's a cap in every other sport. Why are we the last bastion?" So we'll see how stubborn the owners are. If they really, really want it, we'll see if they shut down the game in 2027.
Yeah, let's talk about social media a little bit, because that was something that you touched on before. And I love that you're as in the weeds on social media as you are, because there are a lot of people that have been in the game for decades and want no part of that and just think it's all a joke, and I totally don't blame them. And you're not afraid to call out those people, like you say, when there's some anonymous Twitter user, like you said, with Cheeto dust on their hands, or a radio caller that you want to give it back to them. You're never afraid to do so. But you also have been very good to a lot of the people that are coming up in this new age of media. Obviously, my bosses are kind of the perfect example of that. But a lot of people that are coming up now in media, I see that you very much have an eye for this. Like, I know you've recently pivoted to putting your radio show on YouTube and a lot of things like that. What do you think the future is of baseball media? And I guess, why do you go out of your way to be... no one's forcing you to be warm to what a lot of people would maybe be threatened by as the next generation, but you clearly make it a point that you say, no, this is where the future of the sport is going. And I perceive it as you just saying, I want in on that. I want to help out these guys.
I think, Max, it's just the way I was brought up. Just you pay it forward, stuff like that. Not that anybody went out of their way to help me, but I just remember I was in the parking lot of Steinbrenner Field during spring training, however many years ago. And Jake and Jimmy were there. And nobody knew who Jomboy Media was at that time. And, I went into their trailer and we had fun and I took pictures with them. And I just think it's neat to see people trying to make their way. And if I could help them a little bit, that'd be great. Also, there's a method to my madness. I'm at an age now, nobody's taken my job yet. I'm 64 years old. So how many more years do I have? So if I could actually lay the groundwork for people that are going to better the sport and broaden the scope, I think that's great. I think that Jomboy has brought different fans in. They really have. They brought younger people in. I think you have to adhere to social media. Now, don't get me wrong. I think social media has ruined the world. Forget about sports. It's filthy. It's disgusting. It's the cesspool of life. It gives a microphone, a megaphone to people that are brain dead and moronic, and they have no right to be heard. But I guess everybody has a right to be heard. But I don't think that everybody should listen to everybody that has a microphone. Just because somebody shouts it's that loud and has a really strong opinion doesn't make them right, doesn't make them rational. That's the scary part about social media. But there's parts of it I love. Seeing a guy like you trying to make his way, I think that's tremendous. I'll help whichever way I can. And I just think that anybody in our business should be that way.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's definitely one of the coolest things for me. I always say is I graduated high school in 2020. I was supposed to do kind of the normal college route, but baseball for me was kind of always just if I love this and I know what I'm talking about and people want to help me out and I've started that out already, why would I not do that? And here we are. The fact that I'm sitting here talking to you is something that me 5-10 years ago, I remember, I think I told you that one of my most distinct high school memories is running into you while I was grabbing lunch on a Friday, like 30 seconds before Shohei Ohtani signed with the Angels. So if you had told me at that moment that 5 years or however many years from now, Michael K is going to be on my podcast, that would be pretty cool. So I guess the last question I'll ask you, because I've taken a lot of your time and I appreciate you giving it to me, is what's your just long-term outlook for the future of baseball? On the field, media, when you think 10, 20 years down the road, what do you think we're going to be looking at?
Well, I think it all comes down to what happens in 2027 with the basic agreement. If there's a salary cap, and then they try to get all the regionals under one umbrella, and then they could sell that rather than everybody having disparate incomes from their regional sports networks, then I think it's going to be a completely different look. And I think that it will be more of the model of football, where every team every year is going to have some kind of decent chance, because everybody's going to have the same amount of money. I'm not sure it's going to turn out that way. But the recent media deals that they announced yesterday, I think that's good for baseball. There's people that want to get in on baseball just coming off a great postseason. Record numbers tuning in. I think that bodes well for baseball. And when they make the new media deal in 2028, I think you're going to see more streaming people involved. I think you might even see another network involved as well. Baseball's not going anywhere. Baseball is much more popular than people think. They want to say that it's dying. It's not dying. It's more of a regional sport than a national sport. And you can't compare anything to football. Nothing is football. Football's on a different level. Baseball's as popular, if not more so, than basketball, certainly more popular than hockey, any other sport as well. Baseball's going to be in great shape. It just might look a little different.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think comparing baseball to football or any other sport is a futile effort. I think, again, when I think about baseball and the fact that I was locked into the Michael Pineda for Jesus Montero trade when no one wanted to talk baseball, and my friends that made fun of me for liking baseball then are now texting me about how incredible Ernie Clement is in the playoffs. That's the type of thing that I look at and I go, they must be doing something right. Michael, this was really, really awesome. I really, really appreciate you giving me the time of day.
Of course. I hope I sounded okay, but anytime.
Absolutely. All right. We'll have to do it again soon. Thank you, Michael. Thanks, everyone, for listening.